and welcome to the SheClicks webinar. I'm Angela Nicholson and I'm the founder of SheClicks. Before we get started though, we have a word from our sponsor. This webinar is sponsored by the Photography Show. The Photography Show is back at the NEC from the 17th to the 20th of September for 4 days packed with demos, workshops, masterclasses and the chance to shop till you drop. SheClicks will be there alongside 250 exhibitors, including big brands, plus some fabulous independents selling new and intriguing gadgets. And we'd love to see you there too. There'll be tons to see and buy and do, and whether you're a beginner or an established pro, there's something for you. Tickets are available now, and if you look on the Facebook group, SheClicks Facebook group, you'll get 10% off using the code that's there. If you're a professional photographer or videographer, you can apply to get in for free. Okay, so that's enough from me. It's time to hear from our speaker, Emily Endean. Hi, Emily, how are you?
Hello, yeah, I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. It's really nice to see you.
It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Are you taking some time out from dipping in the sea today?
Yes, yeah, it was raining this morning, so I didn't go in today, but the sun's out again, so tomorrow morning's looking hopeful.
Oh, lovely. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
So, Emily, you're an outdoor photographer. You specialize in landscape and seascape photography, or photography in the sea.
Yes, I do. Yeah, I kind of shoot all kinds of photography, but my niche has kind of naturally gone that way over the years, and it's just something I'm really passionate about.
Okay, well, I'm really looking forward to hearing more about it. Perhaps, do you want to start your talk?
Yes, thank you. So I shall share my screen. Like I say, firstly, thanks for having me here today, and thanks to everyone who's joined me. I'd like to start off just by explaining a little bit about who I am and what I do, in case you've not come across my photography before. So I'm a landscape and seascape photographer, and I'm just a complete ocean addict. And I'm based by the beach in Dorset, so I'm incredibly lucky to have lots of beauty right on my doorstep. So I'm going to take you through my journey into land and sea photography, right from the beginning to where I am today, what I love about it, what inspires me, the kit that I use, and my techniques and settings that I generally look to be using as well. I'll talk for a bit and take you through a few things, and then I'll show you some images, which will hopefully give you a feel for how I shoot and what I see. Also, there'll be time for questions at the end, like Ange mentioned. So taking it right back to the start, I actually moved to the beautiful seaside town of Bournemouth. I was around the age of 4 years old, and I remember being a young child and being obsessed with having a little film camera, and I just loved it. And I was just taking photos of absolutely everything, really blurry photos of my family included. But I was quickly captivated by seizing these moments through a lens. And I still have some of those images now. And that love of photography started right back there, taking photos and sending off my roll of film, just waiting to see what came back. Fast forward to around about 10 years ago now, my wife actually bought me my first DSLR camera for my birthday. It took me a while to get to grips with, because I'm not very technically minded. But once I understood what I wanted to get out of the camera and the images that I wanted to achieve, well, then since learning how to do that, I just haven't put the camera down since. And I remember setting my alarm for my first sunrise and heading out with all my gear packed, flask of coffee, and just watching those colours as they unfolded at sunrise, and just firing off a load of shots as it happened. Looking back at those images now, they probably weren't amazing, but that was it. That's all I needed to be completely hooked on sunrise, and just being out in nature and taking in all those magical moments that happen at dawn. And most people are tucked up in bed, so it almost feels like quite a special moment unfolding there just for you. And I feel like photography really helps me connect with my surroundings and just be really immersed and become part of it. And turning what can be quite a fleeting moment, those colours are gone so quickly, it just turns that time into something a little more permanent with an image that you can look back on. And it's now such a huge part of my life, and I honestly can't really remember what I did before photography. So around 2 years ago, I just had enough of carrying the heavy kit bag around, which is when I made the decision to move to the Fujifilm X series cameras. And after building a relationship as my photography developed, I've actually become a Fujifilm X photographer and brand ambassador this year. So that brings us on nicely, actually to show you the kit that I use. So this is the kit that I generally use when I'm shooting from the shoreline or shooting any landscapes. I've got quite a lightweight Bemro carbon fiber tripod, which is really, really light, nice and easy to hook on the side of your bag and carry around. And my main body for shooting is my X-T3. I've got an X-T2 as a backup camera as well, just in case. Various lenses ranging right the way from a 14mm all the way up to a zoom 200, and quite a few different ranges in between there as well. Obviously, the important things to remember as well, lots of batteries, as you never know when you might have something that's run out on you. I've done that many times, and I won't make that mistake again. Lots of cloths as well. If you're shooting at the shoreline, you're always going to get sea spray, and your memory cards and filters as well. Filters are quite important just for balancing the sky and the land, or if you want to get creative as well, as I'll show you in some of the images that I've taken. So shooting out in the deep. So normally I have my Fujifilm X-T3 and 60mm lens in a Sea Frogs housing, but I also have played around with a GoPro Hero 9 over the last couple of years. And having this in the water really opened my eyes to a different way of shooting. And the GoPros are so different than they used to be, actually. You can shoot in RAW now, so there's much more that you can do with them. And I find them really intuitive because you can actually swim out much easier than a huge housing too. And this dome that you can see in the picture is really good for those 50-50 shots of sky and sea. So they're really, really nice, really, really good to use. It's a good opportunity now if I delve straight into some of my images, just to take you through a good selection that I've taken over the last couple of years. So this one, as you can see, this is a beautiful sunset, and this was taken down at Bournemouth Beach, which is quite local to home. Now I took this as I was arriving at the beach, getting ready to set up on my tripod, and I just saw this scene unfolding to the side of me where these surfers stood there just enjoying the sunset. So it kind of reminded me that you don't always go out with an image in mind, and don't stay too focused on your settings or setting up on your tripod, because there'll be moments that are unfolding around you. So it's always good to keep your eyes open and just look out for what's happening all around you. And you can never miss those special moments. So this is another location that's really close to me. And I've spent a lot of time here, especially during the lockdowns, because not being able to go too far from home, this place is actually a bike ride away from me. So quite often I would have in my bag my X-T3 and just my 35mm lens on. And it would really get me looking at the scenes quite differently, with quite fresh eyes some of the time as well, just looking out for those different perspectives. So one of those quick grab shots towards the end of summer as all the grass is turning a goldeny brown, shortly after sunrise too. I think the best time of day to shoot is sunrise and sunset, and I don't find that I generally shoot during the bright, harsh sunlight during the day. If I do take any shots during those kind of times, then I always want to go back for a revisit at sunrise or sunset, because you know that soft light and those golden tones are really going to set the image off nicely. And so this is a scene, taking it inland now, something that landscape photographers are always after around summertime, looking for those poppy fields. And this particular morning, I left the house super early and the weather wasn't great. It was raining. And I'm so dedicated that I will never go back to bed. I will get up with that alarm and I will get out of the house, because you never know what you're going to miss. So always take that risk. I remember driving to this location and just raining constantly, and I pulled up in the car and I got into the field, and I just kept thinking to myself, what am I doing? Why did I bother? But then as the sun started to rise, there was a real slight gap in the cloud and the rain stopped for just a moment. So I set up on my tripod and I grabbed a couple of shots as the light flooded the field behind this poppy field. And this lasted all of about 2 minutes before the rain started again. And I didn't care. I was happy. I came away with the shots that I wanted, and I headed home. And I think I had 1 or 2 shots that I really liked from that morning. But it's all about being out and just perseverance. You can go out time and time again, and you might not get the right light or the right conditions. But definitely when it's raining, I think as long as you've got a break in the cloud, you're going to get something special. So never let the rain or interesting conditions put you off. I'd always try and chase those interesting times. So this was taken in a woodland not too far from me. And this was after sunrise. This was quite long after sunrise, actually. And I remember walking through the woodland and just handheld, just taking a few pictures. And there's this amazing mist that was just settled in the air. Even though the sun was rising, this golden light was starting to come through. And so for something like this, you don't really have to worry about being on a tripod and getting, a good depth of field, because as you can see, it's probably 3 trees that are in focus, and the rest has really dropped off, because in the mist, you're never going to get everything in focus anyway. So sometimes it is good to think on your feet and just keep moving around and shoot handheld. So normally I shoot in manual settings, just because I want to be able to control everything. So, as long as I've got the shutter speed and the ISO, everything kind of falls in line at the same time. And being on a tripod, I kind of let the shutter speed just do what it needs to do. But handheld, I try and go a bit quicker just to get something quite sharp. Now, Corfe Castle is such a magical location. I'm so lucky that it's quite close to home. So this is probably about 45-minute drive from me. So obviously shooting for sunrise, you need to get up quite early, because you've got to allow that time for getting there as well. And anyone that's shot Corfe Castle knows that to climb the hill, that's the quite famous location where this one's taken from, you do need to get up very early, because that climb can be quite strenuous, depending on your fitness levels as well. So I definitely check the weather conditions, always look for something that's going to add something quite interesting. So, if you've got the right level of mist, the right level of fog coming through, this is the place to be. So as you can see, the sun's just about to come up to the left of the image, and it's casting this really nice pink glow across the sky and that slight bit of high cloud up there, as well as casting that same colour across the mist. And I remember that particular morning so well. The mist was just sweeping round and round the castle, and I was stood with my tripod, shooting round about f11, ISO as low as possible, and then letting the shutter just do what it needs to do. And that particular morning, the mist just kept swirling and building, and it got to a point where the castle wasn't even visible. And it gets to the point where you're hanging around, still shooting. It's like, oh, okay, maybe I should give up now. But these images were probably some of my first of the morning, and some of my favourite. So this is one that I took this bluebell season, and this was on quite a misty morning as well, which was quite nice. So sometimes it's nice to shoot the big wide of Easter, and then sometimes it's nice to narrow in on the details. And I think sometimes walking around the woodland, things catch my eye, and it's nice to just think on your feet and not necessarily have a set plan in mind. So this tree really jumped out to me, and I love the textures that were coming through from the trunk. So I shot just handheld and just bringing this tree and the leaves around it into focus and letting everything just drop away. And I think similar to the earlier image in the woodland that I showed you, I really enjoy shooting this way, because in a woodland, it's nice to let everything else behind it just disappear, because it can get quite messy or quite overwhelming trying to pick out a composition. So I tend to look for something simpler, just like this. Now, this is obviously a very famous location as well, down at Durdle Door. So during the winter months, you get the sun rising through the door. So it's normally around about 2 weeks either side of winter solstice. So I've been shooting this location, aiming for this shot, probably for the last 8 years, I think. And looking back to the beginning, of that time, I would be down on the beach and there might be one or two other people. So I remember last time I did this, I think there was about 20 photographers all trying to shuffle along in the line together, just trying to get the same shot, which is great because obviously, why not? Everybody wants to get this shot. It's such a beautiful place. So for this, I would shoot just playing with the shutter speed, just going for around about half a second. I think I really enjoy playing with shutter speeds, not only to get that stillness, but also to capture the motion. And I think by taking just that half a second shutter speed, you can see this wave that's kind of curling over and crashing in. It creates an element of drama to it. And also with the sky as well. And I do remember that morning, and it was dark, and I didn't think that the sun was going to come through. And as you can see, all you just need is that slither of light and that crack in the cloud just to let this come through. It was absolutely perfect. And like I say, I've been shooting this probably around about 8 years. And I think this was my particular favorite morning, just for all those conditions to come together. I prefer a bit of drama than just a plain sky. I think a plain blue sky can be quite uninteresting. So this drama and the colour picked up in the clouds as well. It's all those kind of things that I'll be looking for when I'm going out shooting. And so this one's taken at Old Harry Rocks. And this is an example of just shooting on a really long shutter speed. And it's something I've played around with over the years. And I used to prefer going for a really, really long shutter speed, just stretching out as long as possible. So this one was taken quite a few years ago. And as you can see from the movement in the cloud in the sky as well, it's quite a lot of high cloud, and it really picked up those soft pastel colours. But as you can see, that movement from it too, just dragging completely across the sky there. So I do find with filters, it's nice to play around with the element of what's going on in the water and keeping that completely still and making that nice and misty and soft and clean. But also it can be really interesting to what it does to the sky as well. So this would have been taken with a stopper and with a neutral density graduated filter as well, just to balance the sky and the land. It really brings out those chalky white cliffs and makes them really sharp in the water as well. So this shot was actually taken in Madeira. So what I found is through photography, the way I travel and the way I see things has changed so much over the last few years. And I found rather than going on holiday and just taking those holiday snaps that I would have in the past, once I'd got heavily involved in photography, I was seeking out locations where we could go on holiday, but I could also incorporate a lot of photography as well. And anyone that's been to Madeira will know that this island is an absolute photographer's paradise. From the rugged cliffs to the green mountains, there's just so much here. So obviously, getting up for sunrise, I always want to try and figure out what's around me. So I'll do a lot of research, and that could be, when I'm at home in England or when I'm going abroad. There's so many apps to use to check all these things. And kind of over the years, it's developed from different weather apps and the photographer's ephemeris, where you can check where the sun's going to rise at different locations. But sometimes it's just a case of just going out and seeing what's around you. So this particular location was really close to where we were staying. And I took a few shots of this particular view, waiting for sunrise, but I was unlucky that morning. There was no gap in the cloud. The sun wasn't going to come up. But actually, it's really interesting because it developed in a way where I do enjoy these moody conditions as well. And it's not always about the bright colours and the harsh light. These dark tones are really, really interesting. And the way the low cloud was moving around this mountain. And like I say, I took quite a few shots. And then that person in the image is actually my wife, who decided to go and have a look over the edge and see what was happening on the other side. And I carried on shooting. And I realized sometimes by adding a person in, it can really give you a good sense of scale. When I was first shooting nature and landscape photography, I really hated including people. And if someone got in the image, it was just really annoying, and I'd have to do it again, or I'd have to clone them out. But I found sometimes now it can really add to the image because you're telling a story. It's not about just the plain landscape as it is, but photography can record moments for all of us, and whether it's a story or an emotion or a reminder of what happened that day, there's so many reasons why we all turn to photography. And I found just by adding someone in an image sometimes can add a whole other context and a whole other element to it. So back to a poppy image, but something a bit different, where I decided to completely crop out the sky. So like I say, sometimes I'll be shooting, and if the sky is quite plain, there's no clouds and there's nowhere for the light to bounce off to give you anything interesting going on, I find that quite lackluster. So I'd rather just exclude the sky altogether. And I remember this particular evening, and I'd been wandering around the edge of a poppy field. And it, as you can see, it was quite a sparse poppy field. Some weren't there yet, some had already gone over. And these poppies were actually just kind of like knee height. They were quite short ones. So I decided to get down low and really focus in on just one poppy, cut out the sky, but really have that golden light coming through the back of the image. Now, for me, shooting flowers and this kind of photography really gives me quite a dreamy feel. And, you know, when I'm shooting it, that's how I feel. So I want to try and convey that in my image. And again, photography is all about storytelling and what do you want to convey to your viewer. So for this kind of image, I really enjoy shooting with such a shallow depth of field that not much is in focus at all. And I've probably focused on just the one poppy and let the rest just drop out into the golden light that's in the background, and anything out of focus in the foreground as well. So I have found over the years, just playing around with shooting things in different ways, you get a feel for what you like. And I love that about photography. There's no right, there's no wrong. You shoot how you want to view things or how you want to show things to your viewer. And like I say, that's one of my favorite things about photography and why we all love it, because we all see things in different ways, and we all capture things in different ways, which makes it really interesting for each of us. So this was a nice bright autumn late afternoon at Stourhead, which is a lovely location, not too far from me, and it's always worth a visit during autumn. And I have a complete obsession with autumn. Not only is my birthday in October, so that makes it quite special, but I just love to be out shooting all the colours. And as you can see from this particular view, I've looked for going for a central composition because everything's just mirrored in the water. Now, I know rules are important in photography because they help you balance an image or help draw your eye to specific things. But I do find that I don't necessarily really think about too many rules like rule of thirds or leading lines. But I think those things do happen quite naturally in some of my imagery. But for this one, because it's a mirror image, I've gone straight down the middle. Just naturally, it felt right. It felt like a balanced image. And those colours that came through were absolutely beautiful. And, you know, for an autumn sunset, you're looking at golden hour, about 4 o'clock, 4:30. So it's really, really easy and really accessible to get out and shoot at that time. And making the most of that golden light that's coming through onto all the beautiful colours there. So this is something else where I've played around with the shutter speed as well. So late afternoon, you're not really going to be able to push your shutter speed too far naturally. So again, this is where filters come in really useful. And just being able to put a stopper on your lens, which will obviously trick the camera into thinking it's darker than it is, and drag out that shutter speed. And I think from memory, I got about 20 or 30 seconds out of this, which was really nice. Obviously, you can still see some movement there because there's still going to be wind, there's still going to be the ducks going past, there's still going to be things that are moving the water, but it's still enough just to drag that out enough to get the wonderful textures and colours and everything that's reflected in the water there. So, like I mentioned, over the years, I've found that I can go out for sunrise time and time again. And on the odd occasion, you don't come home with an incredible sunrise. You know, you're getting up at the crack of dawn earlier, you're leaving in the dark. So you're just relying on weather apps. And weather apps aren't always right, as we all learn along the way. And sometimes you just have to take that chance and just enjoy the moment, because sometimes when that sunrise doesn't come through, there's other things you can do with it. And I really enjoy the blue tones, especially in this type of image here. So this is over at Leap Country Park, where there's some old war memorials and ruins, and these dolphins that are out in the water, a really nice focal point to capture. There's also a lot of these wooden jetties going out. So it's really nice to be able to use a composition where you're bringing that all together. And again, thinking about rules, those dolphin structures are on the third, but that's not something that I've necessarily thought about. It's just something where my eye is naturally drawn to that when I'm framing up an image, you just kind of see what works. And again, playing around with the shutter speed. So as you can see, I've really gone for a longer exposure here. So it's probably quite dark. Like I say, no sunrise, so it's just got these blue hour tones coming through. So I've probably stretched this out slightly using the using a stopper as well. And that's another great thing about photography is just the creativity. You know, some people prefer an instant shutter because you're getting what they feel is the real image that's happening in front of you. Playing around with like some of those half-a-second shutters, you've got a lot of movement, some drama, or going for these 30-second shutters where you've got this smooth water and it all looks quite milky or quite misty around any structures that are in the water. I really love that you can take that scene and you can create what you want to out of it. And over the years, I've experimented with lots of things. And, you know, it all depends on the scene in front of you, that what's happening and how you feel at that time, what you want to shoot. But yeah, I really love the creativity that all of this gives you. So this is a location that I absolutely love visiting. It's in Hampshire and it's probably about an hour and a half, hour 45 from me. So it's something that I generally do just on a summer's evening, maybe once or twice a year. And I've been there on so many occasions and got some lovely shots. Sometimes these fields are full of wheat, sometimes they're full of rapeseed. So sometimes you just never know what you're going to get with crop rotation, but it's always a nice surprise. So on this particular year, it was raining the whole way there. So again, don't worry about that. Still go out. You never know what's going to happen. And as we pulled up in the car, this rainbow appeared, and you probably see just to the top left of the image, it is a double rainbow, but I couldn't fit any more in. So I ran down the edge of the field, just hoping that this wouldn't fade by the time I'd set my camera up. So I quickly got on the tripod, but actually I had to shoot portrait orientation and move around and take 4 images, which then later I stitched together in Lightroom. So it was all happening very quick, and I just hoped that when I stitched these together in Lightroom, it would all work out. And anyone that uses that software knows that doing a panoramic is super easy. You just put in the images, tell it what you want it to do, and it stitches them together for you. So luckily, everything came together really nicely. So, like I say, go out in the rain, because if you're going to get that moment, that break, it's absolutely awesome. So this happened and I got these shots and it stuck around for probably a good 10, 15 minutes, which felt like a long time, which was really, really nice to be able to get lots of images of. And then once that had faded off, I don't think we had a really great sunset that evening. From memory. So it's all about that fleeting moment and just being able to give some kind of permanence to it by having it in this image for me to look back on and remember that wonderful evening, and me to share with everyone else. And you know, my aim with my photography, if I can make the viewer feel like they were there or feel some of the emotion or the feeling that I felt at that time, then that's what it's all about for me, and about telling the story of that particular time, that evening. So this is taken out in the New Forest, and late summer, you've got all the lovely heather coming out. And this particular valley, when the mist settles, it's absolutely perfect. But again, when it comes to the weather apps, I've learned over the years, you can check and all the conditions can look like they're right, but you know, you can get there and the mist might just be settled slightly over the other side of the valley, or there's too much. I've been there on some mornings where it's complete whiteout and you can't see anything. But when all those conditions come together, that's when you know it's worth it, and you're going to get a shot that you're going to come away with and be happy with. So this was taken just around sunrise, and the sun's rising off to the right of the image. So I won't often shoot directly into the sun because I really enjoy getting those softer tones or some nice side light coming through. And again, that's just something you kind of learn with practice over the years, and just what works for you. So this is a location that I'll generally visit late summer. And similar to the door experience, actually, I visited this place for years, and back in the beginning, there would have been maybe me and one other person further up the pathway, or just me on occasion. But now you can go along and there'll just be a whole line of photographers, which is quite difficult with this location, actually, because that pathway, I'm shooting quite low, so it really accentuates the size of it, but it's actually quite small. So you'll have to be quite considerate of where people are positioned and trying to get the shot. But I really love how the pathway comes through the right of the image and leads you down into the valley below. And like I say, it's not really something I think about when it comes to rules of photography, but sometimes you frame up an image or a scene in front of you, and these kind of compositions just really call out because they just work. So this was taken in the Lake District. And kind of what I touched on with the Madeira shot is when I travel now, even in the UK, I'm always thinking about photography. So even if it's just a holiday in general, I'll always be looking at Google Maps, or I'll be Googling what locations are in the area, or Instagram's a great tool just to have a browse and see what kind of things are in the area. And Google Maps, you can kind of zoom in anywhere and see what's around you. But yeah, the Lake District, I mean, it's just stunning at every corner. This is Bleetarn Lake, and I have to admit this was probably my favorite from this trip, and it was taken during autumn. Like I say, my favorite time of year. It's just the colors are just absolutely incredible. And as you can see, not just in the trees, but in the whole landscape, everything's gone that golden brown color. It's absolutely beautiful. So I took this. We were planned out heading out for sunrise. So this was taken shortly before, but actually nothing really happened with sunrise. You'd think from that cloud that was there, the sun would rise and cast some nice golden light across them, but it never actually happened. And I think it's because off to the left of the image on the horizon, there was quite a bit of cloud block. So the cloud never really let the sun through to cast that light. But it didn't matter to me. This scene was absolutely beautiful. And the wind was completely still. So even going for whatever shutter speed the camera allowed me to, the water was so clear, so sharp that these reflections just came through so wonderfully. And I felt the blue kind of worked with those orangey tones as well, kind of set it off quite nice. And I thought afterwards, actually, I'm glad that the sunrise wasn't this array of bursting colour, because maybe it would have taken away from the colour of the landscape. So instead, by having these bluey tones, it's really accentuated for me what is the main focal point of this image, and it is that landscape. And again, shooting just for that central composition, just because it creates a nice mirrored image from having that dead centered line through. When it's so sharp with those reflections, I think it's just absolutely beautiful. And including these three rocks in the foreground as well. I took many images that morning, and I think sometimes with my photography in general, I kind of look for something that will come through in the foreground, just because if you can change your positioning, you can lower yourself or change the angle of your camera and pick something up that's right in front of you in that foreground, and really accentuate the size of these rocks, for example, that were quite small. You're adding something else to your image, and it's adding a point of interest, or it's making something your own as well, just by adding something different that other people might not be. So always keep your eyes open for what's around you, see what else you can incorporate in your image. This is a location close to home as well. So this is somewhere I cycled very regularly during the lockdowns. And I felt really lucky and blessed to be so close to somewhere like this, that I can go immerse myself in the water, have a swim, take some photos. And I actually run workshops at this location quite a lot. So this is Hengistbury Head. It's an absolutely beautiful location because there's so much to offer photography wise. And there's this lovely section of water that when the tide is just right and the water is still enough and there's no wind, you can get the reflections of these beach huts. So usually on my workshops, we'll work around different areas of this place, and then this will be one of the final spots before we head back because it's quite a walk. So it's much easier on the bike. So this is absolutely amazing to get those reflections. And again, without even thinking about it, this has gone for like a central composition, just because there's not a lot happening above or below as well. So just by really focusing on all those huts is really nice. And this was taken just around sunset. So you can probably tell that the sun is just to the left, kind of behind me, casting the last of the light across the water and onto these huts. And it's just such a special time of day. I just love being out on a summer's evening at this location. It's just a great place to be. So a bit of a contrast, really. This is taken down at Bournemouth on a very stormy morning. So I remember this morning well, and I remember taking shelter under the pier while it was raining. So people do say that I'm quite crazy just going out in any weathers. I will get soaked from head to toe. If it's not the shoreline going over my shoes and getting my feet soaked, then I'm stood out in the rain somewhere. So it's always important to think about what gear you're using. So all of my camera gear is weatherproof. So in that respect, you can that takes the pressure away from having to keep covering your camera. Obviously, you're going to have to wipe your lens or your filters constantly just to prevent those raindrops from ruining any images when you get home and you're looking back at them. So yeah, like I say, this particular morning I was tracking it down. I was taking shelter under the pier, and there was a slight moment where the rain let up, so I ran out, grabbed this composition on my tripod, and just went for a quicker shutter. Long enough that I was on my tripod, and it's probably about a quarter of a second. And like I mentioned, it's great playing around with shutter speeds because you can cause this drama to be captured in your image as well. So not necessarily going for a long shutter speed, but just enough that it freezes that wave as it comes over. And also all those lovely lines in the water as well, where the wave's drawn back. So quite often I've found that I will hit the shutter either as the waves crashing in or the waves drawing back, just because it adds that element of extra detail and extra foreground as well. It can add something really interesting. So as you can see from those dark skies, I don't think I really needed a filter as such on this occasion. I just grabbed my shots. The rain started again, so I ran back under the pier. But it was lovely because as you can see, there's that nice touch of golden light that's come through. And just being out in those conditions, just waiting for that slight break, and it doesn't always happen, but when it does, you're so glad that you stuck with your plan and went out because it's so rewarding. Just to come home with even a couple of images I'm happy with, and I'm set up for the day. Plus, photography aside, it's my favorite time of day just to be out by the seaside anyway, just taking in sunrise and enjoying those moments before most people are even up. So talking about fleeting moments, I'll quite often go and shoot the surf and the surfers that are out there as well. So this was taken at Bournemouth Beach, and I was just wandering around handheld, just shooting a few scenes. And this particular surfer was stood there holding their board. They just got out of the water. And I saw off to the left of the image, there's this kite in the sky as well. Just a fleeting moment, a quick grab shot, handheld. And the sky was quite plain, quite blank. So it's quite nice to think of converting those kind of scenes into black and white, because for me, it really brought out the details and the textures, and it adds quite a classic feel to a scene as well. So that's something that's changed for me over the years. And I think it's because when you're shooting sunrise and sunset, you don't really want to change well, me personally, I never really wanted to change anything to black and white because I didn't want to take away from those beautiful colors that are out in the landscape or the colors that are coming through in the sky. So sometimes if those colors aren't quite coming through, I'll definitely start thinking in black and white and see what kind of scenes will jump out at me. So my style of shooting in that respect has definitely come a long way in my journey in photography. And this shot was taken during the recent storms, and it was during the day. I just nipped out on my lunch break to grab a few shots of the waves pounding against this pier. So the sky was completely blown out. It was really uninteresting. But for me, it was all about this spray from the waves. So they were crashing against the pier. The wind was whipping through underneath the pier, blowing all that spray up into the air. So again, it seemed quite natural to me to change this to black and white, just because the sky was doing nothing for it, and keeping it in colour, I just felt it lacked an impact. So by turning it into black and white, I just really felt it gave it quite a classic feel. And another from the stormy shots. So sometimes I really enjoy looking for more abstract feels, or picking out details that are really coming through. So rather than the huge wider vista of all the waves crashing in on the beach, I decided to switch to my zoom lens and really focus in on certain parts of the waves that were crashing. So on this particular scene, there was, I think it was 3 waves, and the line were crashing through. And every now and then there'd be a big part that jumped up, and you could see this really bright green flash coming through where the sunlight was so strong behind it. So I decided to make the most of that and pick out sections that this green light was coming through. And as you can see, there's this small section. But for me, it was just about finding those small parts, and it added such character to the image, I felt, rather than shooting the big scene of all the waves crashing in on the beach. So it's looking for those details within the scene that you're looking at. And talking of details, I get very obsessed with shells or stones on the beach. So looking for something like this stone, I will just be on my tripod, tilt my camera right down. I'll be either on probably my 60mm macro for this, or 35mm sometimes, and I'll literally just focus on the stone or the shell and fire off a few shots, going for about half a second, or just whatever you can work with. It depends on the light, really. So just a quicker shutter, not too long. As the wave is coming in or going out, I'll just hit that shutter. So I think I came home that particular day with about 100 shots of this stone. And the great thing is, because every shot is different, the water wraps around it in a different way. I've been told a few times this looks like a fur coat or a fur collar wrapping itself around the stone. And I love how everyone can see something different in a shot like this. Whether it's something really abstract or whether it's just a detail on the shoreline. I find that really interesting because, we can all go out and we can see completely different things. We can all head down to the beach with our cameras, but we will all look for something different. And I love that because we will all shoot things in a completely different way as well. So just taking you out into the water, this is with my XT3 and my Sea Frogs housing. And I love to try and shoot at water level as close as I can. So this was around sunrise. The sun is actually rising behind me, but I decided to turn around and focus in on this pier. This pier is really close to home, so I shoot this a lot. It features in a lot of my images. But I just love this new perspective that I could get from going out in the water and getting as low as I can while I'm having a swim, and just focusing in on the pier. And it just changed the perspective of how your eye sees the water and all those details and everything that comes through in the ripples in the water. And I found it a really mindful experience, just a whole new way of shooting as well. So I've really got into this over the last couple of years. And even just below the surface, I found I was shooting seaweed and suddenly seeing all these different things coming through, and what are all these spots all over my image? And actually, it's all the oxygen obviously coming from the seaweed and everything in the water in the ocean. And I found this whole new perspective of being able to see things in such a different light. And I just love shooting this way because sometimes you never really truly know what you've got until you get home and look on the computer and look back at your images. And again, the same pier, as you'll become familiar with in my imagery, just shooting out in the water. This was not long after I got my waterproof housing, and just playing in the shoreline and just watching sunset and watching all the people go by. And you can see there's people on the pier taking pictures, this person walking out with their surfboard. And it's all those kind of bits that come together in a scene to really tell a story. So it is always worth looking for what's going on around you and just waiting for these moments to unfold. And looking for different things. So this pier is Bournemouth Pier, which I've shot so many times. And I had this image in mind, and I thought it'd be really cool to get so low in the water that the water's taking up most of the image, but you can just see the top of these features on the pier. So this was something that I really wanted to shoot. I was really excited to get. And I took probably 300 pictures that morning, and the water's moving at different levels in front of my lens. And this was the one. This was exactly what I had in mind. So sometimes I will have an exact image in mind, and I do try and achieve that. But like I say, it's always worth looking around you and seeing what's going on as well. And this particular morning, there was no sunrise, as you can see. It was really flat, nothing happening. But again, I felt that kind of worked for it, because then your eyes are just drawn to the details of exactly what I want you to see. And, we're not taken away by the exciting sky. So it was just something a little bit different, something I wanted to achieve. So talking about focusing in on the ripples in the water, I'll shoot with my 60mm macro lens in my housing because I really enjoy the perspective that it brings. So I can get really close up to shoot the ripples. So I'll generally focus in somewhere and just fire off on continuous mode and fire off maybe 10, 15 shots. And just see what I've got when I get home, really. So I could shoot easily on a morning 500 images and look through on my laptop, and I'll end up probably with 10 that I really like. So it does fill up my memory cards pretty fast. But I found this style of shooting is something that I'm just really drawn to, just because it's so mindful. I love being in the water, and I'm into swimming in the sea quite often. So the fact that I can tie these two things in together is what it was really all about for me. And I just started sharing images like this then on my social media and in presentations. And I just found that people really enjoyed it too, which was really nice, because it was just such a personal project when I started out this way. And just being able to see the sunrise just coming over the horizon. So this, I've just really focusing on a ripple, really shallow depth of field, and it adds something so dreamy to the image. And the water's constantly moving around you, so you never know what you're going to get. But just being able to see the sun coming up, like I say, as it's just tipping the horizon, that's the kind of image that I really, really enjoy being able to capture. And just a similar example as well, just an out of focus sun, which just looks, it just looks out of this world, really. It doesn't really look like the sun. But the whole point for me is focusing in on ripples that are close to me as the water kind of like dances past my lens. Just being able to use the macro lens and get so up close and be able to focus in on that. And on these particular mornings when the sunrise is just so beautiful, here in the UK, the water doesn't get very warm, and quite often I'm just in a swim costume just because I love that cold water experience as well. So for me, it's the memory, the storytelling. Again, it's not just about the image. There's a whole lot more to it for me. And I think this is the last example as well. This is probably one of my favorites that I've taken out in the water, just because I love the detail that came through in that ripple there. And this did really well for me. And I'm a member of the Guild of Photographers, and this won the Creative Digital Art category last year at their award ceremony. And I was just over the moon because, like I say, shooting in this style became something really organic for me a couple of years ago during the pandemic, and it just kind of was a natural extension of me getting in the water and being able to take these photos too. So the fact that they've done really well and other people seem to like them is just really the icing on the cake for me. Just a really special personal project, and yeah, just filling up my hard drives with thousands of images of ripples in the water, just trying to look for something different each time as well. So that is all of my images that I have to show. So I hope you've enjoyed looking at them, and I hope they might have inspired you to maybe get in the sea or try something different. But yeah, open to any questions if anyone's got anything to add or anything to ask.
Hi, Emily. That was absolutely fantastic. I really enjoyed your pictures, but I was particularly drawn to the last few that you showed, the more sort of abstract ones that you were talking about. They're absolutely amazing.
Oh, thank you.
And And it struck me, you did mention the word mindfulness. And I
Mm.
think one of the appeals of photographing something like the sea is its constant movement. So it's extremely unlikely that you'll get exactly the shot you want first time. Whereas when you're completely in control of things, you can actually achieve that. And sometimes, say with a portrait, you might take a shot and then you take another one, or you do, and you suddenly realize you're just taking the same shot because you want that immersive experience. Whereas when you're working with the sea, you're in the sea and it's changing.
Yeah.
You get sucked in by the fact it's constantly changing. You're looking for something and then suddenly you get it, and you get that extra kind of hit because you really had to hang around and try and experiment.
Yeah, I think even shooting from like landscapes, taking it into the sea, they're so different. And
Mm.
yeah, like you say, there's that moment I'm floating around, I'm watching the ripples in front of my lens, and I'm waiting for that sun just to peak, and then I'm firing off all these shots. And like I said, I could take 500, and some of them are just nothing, something and nothing. But I'm looking for something really particular, and like yeah, when that happens, you just get that feeling inside, like oh yes, I've got the shot. But yeah, just it's a really mindful experience, and I think it's completely being immersed in nature as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, being in the water,
quite
literally
literally.
immersed in nature, but yeah, just any kind of nature photography though, you're kind of taking in all those elements, and all of your senses are really engulfed in what's happening.
Now we do have some questions. The first one, somebody was asking you. You said you go out very early, often by yourself. Do you ever feel vulnerable when you're going out by yourself?
Um, no, I think I normally feel okay, and I think it's because of being with the camera or behind the camera lens. I think I get so engulfed in the moment that I kind of forget about other things. But yeah, I've been asked that quite a lot, and it does make me think, perhaps going out in the early hours when it's dark. I mean, I have got, photographer friends. So quite often if it's a trip like that, we'll kind of plan to do something together. So I'm not always alone. And if I'm going out in the sea, normally I've got my wife with me, or I've got other friends that like swimming in the sea too. So normally there's someone around. So yeah, it's not too dangerous.
And I guess you always make sure that somebody knows where you're planning to go. So, and you've got
Yeah.
your mobile phone and things. It's quite different these days, isn't it?
Yeah, it's totally different these days. And I think that's something that people close to you will always worry about. If you're going out on your own and you're gone for hours and they don't hear from you, and you're on the edge of a cliff somewhere, or you're out in the ocean, then yeah, understandably other people really do worry. I think it's when it's you personally, you're not as worried, and you're like, oh, I'm okay, I know what I'm doing, I'm fine. But yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't
Yeah.
stop other people caring and worrying.
Okay. Right. Some more questions. Well, someone was saying they were going to ask if you ever posted in black and white, but then you showed some images. But do you use presets? Do you ever use the in-camera black and white modes? Because, Fuji cameras have got some fantastic black and white modes.
Yeah, they have. I haven't really experimented with the Fujifilm simulations enough, to be honest with you, because there's lots
Mm.
built into the camera. But no, so I'll generally just completely shoot in RAW,
Mhm.
and then I'll process in Lightroom, and I've kind of got my go-to settings. So over the years, I've kind of developed my own presets that I've just saved down rather than me doing the same things over and over again, which is now an extensive set of presets. So I'm still tweaking them all the time. But because it all depends on the colors, what's coming through in the scene, what time of day you're shooting, how bright is the light. But yeah, like I say, I never really used to process in black and white until probably the last couple of years, I'd say. Um, yeah, it calls out a lot to me now, depending on the scene that's in front of me.
I guess once you start doing it, you're better able to visualize it. And then,
Hmm.
like you say, if you've got some presets, you start thinking, oh, that'll work well with that one, or I'll just tweak this a little bit.
Yeah, and I've got mine, like I say, saved down, so I can kind of scan through them and see what works best for a particular image as a basis, and then you can make further tweaks from there. So yeah, I do find that's quite easy for Lightroom, isn't it? It's quite intuitive in that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Now we've got a couple of questions about your wetsuit. You said that you sometimes don't wear a wetsuit, but
Mm.
other times you do.
Yeah, so I've got a winter wetsuit that I've got from Animal from doing a bit of work with them. So that's quite cool. So I shoot out in the water with Animal, and yeah, they gave me the wetsuit in exchange, which was pretty handy.
Nice.
So it's like a 5 millimeter winter wetsuit. It's nice and toasty. But I enjoy the whole experience. And normally I am just in a swimming costume, but in the winter months, if I want to stay in longer, I will wear the wetsuit. So I think there's that balance. It's being sensible as well, because yeah, the water gets pretty cold in the UK, so it's not worth risking staying in too long, to be honest.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm the sort of wuss who wears a winter wetsuit in the summer. Someone is asking, do you decide, or what point do you decide when you go, what lens you're going to use? So, do you do it in advance, say when you're putting the camera into the housing at home, or do you take a selection of lenses and decide what you're going to use when you're on the beach?
Yes, that depends what I'm shooting, really. So if I'm shooting at the shoreline, I normally, my go-to is probably my 14mm, because I like to be quite wide at the shoreline, because whether there's like a groin or a shell or something that's going to create a foreground, or the sweeping movement from the waves. So I love the 14mm for that because of what you can get in there. But if I'm going out in the housing into the water, that is pre-planned, because I need to get it all clipped in, water sealed and tight before I'm at the beach. So generally I use my 60mm lens in that, just for the reasons, like I said, getting that perspective of the water and being able to get the ripples up close to the lens. I can also get the 18-55 in the housing, but I don't find the perspectives quite as good for what I want to achieve. Everything's that bit more further away, and the depth, you can't focus as close. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's premeditated 60mm in the water, and then at shoreline I have a lot in my bag, but my 14mm is the go-to.
Okay, thank you. Now, someone was asking if you could just reiterate which GoPro you use and also which housing.
Yeah, so the GoPro is the Hero 9. I think there is a 10, perhaps even 11 out now, but they bring them out all the time. But they're so good these days shooting in RAW, so they're really easy to use, especially if you're swimming around. It's much easier to hold.
Mhm.
So yeah, they're really good. I've got the dome housing on that to shoot like 50-50 shots as well. And then the housing for my Fuji film is a Sea Frogs housing, which is from Hong Kong. There's a few brands out there, but the prices vary. And yeah, I think mine was about £600, which was kind of about middle of the road. There's some more expensive ones out there, but yeah, the Sea Frogs one I found really reliable.
Great. And with the GoPro, I mean, the 9
Mm.
is fully waterproof without a housing, isn't it? But is it because you like to
Yeah.
go a bit deeper?
Yeah, so I had a friend who found water did leak into theirs, which was replaced by GoPro, but it's because of where you pull up the catch for the battery and the
Yeah.
card. It is sealed, but there is a slight gap, and I just didn't want to risk it. Because the dome is obviously going to make it waterproof anyway, but the dome changes the perspective, and it means that you can get those level water shots as well. So it's kind of like two birds, one stone there, just to extra waterproof and to get the perspective that I like on the water.
Yeah, great. Have you ever
Yeah.
lost a camera in the sea?
No, touch wood. No, I haven't. I know
Good.
people that have, but no, I haven't. And I think with the big housing, I've got this small strap that goes around your wrist. So when the water's calm, that's fine. I'll just have it around my wrist. But I've been out in the waves and I've been knocked over, and my housing's been kind of pulled away from me as I'm being pulled. So I bought a bodyboard armband. So it
Mhm.
like velcros around you, and
Yes.
it's got some good strength to it. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's
that's
not
a good
worth losing
idea.
in the water, is it?
That's a very good idea.
Yeah.
Um, and someone said she's never used a camera housing for underwater photography, and she likes it's an interesting perspective. So she was wondering how you operate the camera. Do you preset it? Do you still have full control?
Yeah, so GoPro aside, because GoPro is what it is and it's more point and click, but with the housing and my Fujifilm X-T3, I do have full control of all the settings except for the aperture.
Mhm.
So because my aperture is on the lens, I set that before I put it in the housing. So generally I could shoot, I mean, I could do f2.8 if I wanted, but I generally go about 4.5.
Mhm.
And the reason for that is I quite like that depth of field and what I can get in from the ripples in the water. So that I'll have to set before I go in. But all the other settings I can still access on the housing, and I can still press all the buttons. So yeah, everything's changeable. So I can change the ISO depending on the light, and I can change the shutter speed. So yeah, it's quite flexible, and I can change those things. So it's quite a good piece of kit.
Yeah, good. And just to be clear, someone's saying when you shoot in the water, is your camera half in the water?
Yeah, so the I could probably show you my housing actually. So from the for the ports, as you can see, it's quite big. So generally for where the actual lens will be, I'll probably shoot so the water's around about here. So that I'm really focusing on what's directly coming up right in front of the lens. So because it's got that wide space, yeah, I'll probably be floating along and kind of be quite submerged so that the water's around about midway on the port, which is, yeah, that's kind of what I want to achieve out of it.
Do you spend a lot of time cleaning that?
No, so all you need to do is give it a rinse when you get home, so to get the salt water off. And then I'll towel dry it, wait a little while for it to dry properly, and then I'll open it and get the camera out. So yeah, quick shower when you get in, and all good.
Okay. So someone is asking if you have any tips for saving your tripod from the effects of seawater and sand.
Yeah, so I always went through tripods really rapidly. Being at the shoreline, you know, you're going to get sand caught in there and it's going to destroy them pretty quickly. So, I mean, as a general rule, I don't spend too much on a tripod for that reason, because I just think it's going to be a waste of money for me. So the Benro carbon fiber travel tripod that I've got, I think I got it for about £100, and I think it's normally about that price most places. And that's lasted me 2 years. The previous one I had before that, I had another Benro, and that was about 2 years. So this one's going strong at the moment. I did buy some marine grease that they use on boats and things underwater. So I do grease the legs every now and then. I've probably done it twice actually, so I haven't done it that much, but I've just tried that to see if I can make it last a bit longer. But yeah, that is the hazard of being at the shoreline and being at the beach, I'm afraid. So yeah, I would never spend, you know, hundreds of pounds on a tripod just for that reason.
And when you said you grease the legs, do you mean just the screw parts, the joints?
Yeah, so my legs will unscrew, and then I'll pull them out, and I'll just grease the joints and grease the whole leg so that when it's pushed back in, it's just completely coated, just to really stop all the salt getting in too much.
Right. Okay. It's not like, you know, you see the channel swimmers where they cover themselves in grease. It's not that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, not that intense.
Okay. And someone is asking if you've ever had any issues with sea frog housings, and somebody else is saying they've had problems with water droplets on, I think she means on the outside. She said nothing seems to work apart from licking the housing, which, you know, licking the glass, which is something I've done that with GoPros, but never with a housing the size of yours.
No, I do that with the GoPro quite a lot, but yeah, I wouldn't want to be licking that dome port. No, so I mean, generally the way I shoot is, if I go fully submerged, you know that there's going to be water somewhere on the lens, or on the port rather. Something that you can use, which causes the droplets to run off a bit quicker, is Rain-X, which is something that people do use on windows and car windscreens and things like that. So you can just put a bit of that on with a cloth, let it dry, and it will just kind of add a slight coating, which kind of disperses the water more than the water sitting there. So yeah, I would definitely recommend using Rain-X. I have used that a couple of times, and that's something you don't have to apply all the time.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you do any of your creative or your sort of abstract photography with the GoPro?
Yeah, I definitely have done. So there's some shots that I've got where it's kind of like under the water and there are waves crash and there's lots of bubbles coming up. So yeah, when I was first getting into underwater photography, I was using the GoPro a lot and just holding it underneath, firing off loads of shots, and then just having a look when I got home. And that was when it dawned on me, actually, there's some really cool abstract scenes happening underneath that we can't see. So yeah, definitely, I think the GoPro is just amazing for that kind of stuff. Especially, like I say, these days shooting raw, and the only thing is not having full control over settings, but it is what it is. It's just a nice little bit of kit, really.
And you don't need to worry about focusing or anything. It just, you know.
Yeah, well, yeah, so in some respects it's easier. Yeah, you just fire off the shots.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a preferred slow shutter speed for making silky water?
So going for the really silky water, so when it's really flat, I will go for probably around 30 seconds if I can push it. So either early in the day or late in the evening, you've got a bit of lack of light, then put a stopper on, and you can easily get 30 seconds out of it. So yeah, going for that completely silky smooth water, yeah, 30 seconds is great because everything's completely smoothed out.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been occasions that I've gone way overboard and gone for about 4 minutes, and you realise actually it doesn't look any different than what you've done over 30 seconds or a minute anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, 30 seconds is probably a sweet spot for those longer shutters, I reckon.
Yeah. And when you
Yeah.
had the waves where you sort of caught them and there's a little bit of movement, I think you said,
Mm.
was it half a second, something like that for those?
Yeah, so I normally go for about half a
Yeah.
second, even a second, because I find that really captures the drama because you've got that slowness, but also you can see the wave coming over and it adds a bit of drama. So yeah, half a second, a
Yeah.
second. Yeah, depending on the light.
And with the stoppers, do you
Mm.
talk about, is it the big stopper, the little stopper? So like 10 stops or 6?
Yeah, so I've got both. I think generally I use the little stopper more.
Mm-hmm.
I find the big stopper for the times of days that I'm shooting, like early and late. I don't really need a big stopper. I don't need to block it that much. So yeah, I use a little stopper, which I think is 6 stops. So I use that quite a lot.
Well, that makes sense. Yes. So it's
Yeah.
obviously not full sun at the time you tend to be shooting.
Yeah. So
And the
sometimes
fun,
you can get a longer shutter anyway if you're shooting
yeah,
at like 7 p.m. or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the final question, I'm going to say it's the final question, but somebody might zip in with another one just as I finish reading it or while you're speaking. Do you use focus stacking in your landscapes, or do you use HDR at all?
No, I don't. So I normally shoot one image. I've tried focus stacking, but I don't know if it's a slight laziness or if I just want to try and get it right in camera. And I know you can't always get everything
Mm.
focused exactly right in camera, but I find for me, I love shooting and I just love being out in the environment and getting the images. And then I probably spend about a minute processing each image. I don't really enjoy sitting in front of the laptop,
Mm.
and I know some people can spend days processing an image, but I think that would drive me insane. So I think because I like being quite quick with the process, I take one image and I don't generally look to focus stack or take multiple images for HDR or
Yeah.
blending or anything like that. So yeah, generally one image per shot.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that is the last of the questions, but there's been lots of comments of people really, really enjoying your images and loving hearing what you have to say. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.